S. Chand presents Educational Video Lectures as per the new UGC curriculum. Difficult concepts made easy. Study anywhere, anytime.
Once upon a time, an aspiring designer, Miss Roshni, was approached by a prestigious clothing brand, offering her a dream collaboration. Elated, which means happy, Roshni, she eagerly signed the contract without carefully reviewing the terms. However, as she reached deeper, she discovered hidden clauses that heavily favored the brand. Brand means clothing brand. So realizing her lack of free consent, what does it mean? If you refer my last videos, we were talking about the essentials of a valid contract, and out of those ingredients to form a valid contract, free consent plays a vital role into that. Free consent means mutual consent between the contracting parties to form a valid contract. So realizing her lack of mutual consent between the clothing brand and Roshni, so Roshni sought legal guidance or say advice. So with the help of a brilliant lawyer, they uncovered the evidence of coercion, which means dabav, coercion and undue influence by the clothing brand. So let us continue the same slide. Armed with this knowledge, and Roshni confronted the brand, demanding fair amendments to the contract. Amendment means revision. So she started, finding out, hidden clauses into the contract, and she confronted the clothing brand and she demanded for a new contract with the revised terms and conditions as per the free consent. So in the face of a potential legal action, clothing brand revised the terms to reflect the mutual benefit. To reflect the mutual benefit means to reflect the free consent over here, free assent of the contracting parties. So this story exemplifies the importance of this particular term, which is very important, which is one of the vital ingredient of a valid contract, empowering and clearing individuals means business people, to stand up against the unfair contracts and safeguards their rights and duties.
If you want to study this topic in detail, refer to the book by S. Chand Publishing and Vikas Publishing House. Link is provided in the description box.
Welcome to S. Chand Academy. My name is Mohit Kapil. Today we are going to discuss about the next topic, and that is free consent. We just had a discussion regarding the very interesting story so that we can understand this particular term, that is free consent here. And let us move to the actual content. It is also known as uncoerced and voluntary agreement of contracting parties without any undue influence. Please make a note of it. Without any undue influence, without any fraudulent activity and misrepresentation or mistake. A free consent is always known as uncoerced and voluntary agreement of contracting parties without any undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation or mistake. So there are certain key rules for mutual or free consent, which are as follows. Let us have these discussions one by one. So absence of coercion. In order to have a free consent, there should be absence of coercion. Please make a note of it. I am here talking about the absence of coercion. Okay. So absence of coercion. Coercion means forcing someone to do something or prohibiting someone by either a threat or a force. जब हम लोग किसी के ऊपर दबाव बनाकर, किसी को धमकाकर किसी काम को कराने की कोशिश करते हैं, तो क्या आपको लगता है, डू यू रियली फील दैट वुड देयर बी एनी फ्री कंसेंट इन टू फॉर्म अ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट? अगर मैं किसी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में एंटर करना चाह रहा हूं और अगर मैं करने से पहले ही किसी के ऊपर दबाव बनाकर उस कॉन्ट्रैक्ट पे साइन करा रहा हूं, then that is absolutely not a free consent. So that will definitely not lead to a valid contract also. So in order to have a valid contract, there are certain terms and conditions to have a free consent. The number one is absence of coercion. In order to understand this particular topic, let's have an example so that you can get it very clear कि exactly absence of coercion होता है क्या. A contractor you better understand who are the contractors. A contractor जो कि building बनाता है, he threatens a large business owner, Mr. Johnny, with physical harm, and if he does not sign an unfavorable contract. एक इन दोनों के बीच में एक बिजनेस टर्म्स नेगोशिएट हुआ और वहां पर नेगोशिएशन के टाइम पर इमीडिएटली एक कॉन्ट्रैक्टर ने जॉनी को बोला, अगर तूने ये कॉन्ट्रैक्ट साइन नहीं किया तो मैं तुझे फिजिकल हार्म दूंगा या दे दिया होगा. Based on that, forcing to Johnny, Mr. Johnny into an agreement against his will. So this is an example of coercion in a contract. Let me reiterate. A contract threatens a large business owner, Mr. Johnny, with physical harm if he does not sign an unfavorable contract, forcing Mr. Johnny into an agreement against his will. So this is an example of coercion in a contract, जहां पर ये साफ clearly mention है that a contractor is trying to threaten to Mr. Johnny against his will or whatever the contract is there, ताकि वो दबाव बनाकर threaten करके force create करके उनसे sign करा ले, which is not a free consent here. I hope the point is clear to you. So in this particular slide, we have discussed about the meaning of free consent, the legal rules, and certain conditions which are required to form a mutual or free consent in any contract. So now the next slide is absence of undue influence. The consent. In order to understand this particular topic, undue influence, हमें लगता है कि I think we should refer the example first. For example, an elderly woman, Mrs. Smita, जो कि एक बूढ़ी अम्मा है, she is influenced by her relative to transfer her valuable property to him. Him, it means someone who is a relative to her. In her will, taking advantage of her penetrability. What does it mean? शायद हो सकता है उनको कोई injury हो गई हो, या हो सकता है वो physically weak है, she is vulnerable. So in order to have that particular contract, here the relative is trying to transfer her valuable property with the use of undue influence. Let us have a look into it. So ये क्या demonstrate करता है? This clearly demonstrates the undue influence in this particular contract between the relative and Mrs. Smita, who is an elderly woman, just because of his vulnerability, or you can say penetrability. I hope this example makes you clear that what is the absence of undue influence. So in order to have a free consent in any valid contract, there should be absence of undue influence. अगर कोई जोर जबरदस्ती है तो वो free consent नहीं हो सकता. So the consent which must not be influenced by any unfair means, or when a party is in a position to dominate the other party and creates an undue influence. Let me highlight something here. I am emphasizing on the word domination. आपके घर में भी और आप भी कभी ना कभी डोमिनेट हुए होंगे, कभी किया होगा आप लोगों ने. सो अगर आपने कभी इस तरीके का कॉन्ट्रैक्ट क्रिएट किया जहां पे आपने किसी को डोमिनेट किया, सो इट इज एब्सोल्युटली क्लियर कि वहां फ्री कंसेंट नहीं है. एंड इफ देयर इज नो फ्री कंसेंट, देन यू आर नॉट एंटाइटल्ड टू फॉर्म अ वैलिड कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. सो द अदर पार्टी क्रिएट्स एन अनड्यू इन्फ्लुएंस टू डू और नॉट टू डू समथिंग. सो दिस इज एब्सोल्युटली क्लियर. Absence of undue influence, it should be there, it should not be there into the valid contract. Now next point is, the next condition is absence of fraud. Again, to have a free consent between the contracting parties, there should not be any fraudulent activity involved into that. The consent between the parties must not be obtained through any deceitful tactics or misrepresentation. Take an example. Let us take an example. This is an instance which has been given to you people to make you aware. A, as a seller, जानबूझ करके मिसरिप्रेजेंट करता है एक ऐसी प्रोडक्ट की कंडीशन को एक बायर को, जो कि एक फॉल्स क्लेम कर रहा है दैट पर्टिकुलर प्रोडक्ट इज ए ब्रांड न्यू प्रोडक्ट, और वो बेचना चाह रहा है कोई पुराना प्रोडक्ट. आई बिलीव द बायर डिस्कवर्स द चीट आफ्टर परचेज. बायर ने देखा कि अरे जो मैंने बाद में परचेज किया प्रोडक्ट, ये तो बिल्कुल गलत है, जो मैंने चाहा था वो तो मुझे मिला ही नहीं. सो इंडिकेटिंग द फ्रॉडुलेंट एक्टिविटीज इनटू दैट पर्टिकुलर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, एंड दैट लीड्स टू no free consent in the valid contract. और अगर no free consent नहीं है, if there is no mutual consent, then you cannot form a valid contract. I hope this particular slide is clear to you. This slide talks about the absence of undue influence, which should be the one of the condition to have a free consent, and the second condition is absence of fraud. So we had two different examples to make it clear. Let us move to the next slide. So now this is the question time. Here are the two people, Mr. Z and Mr. Y. Mr. Z wants to sell his car to Mr. Y at a certain price, but did not specify which car, as Z has various cars. Let me reiterate, Z. who is the car owner here, he wants to sell his car to Mr. Y at a certain point, certain price, certain cost. But he did not specify that which car he is trying to deliver or to sell. Either it is a luxury car or a non-luxury car which is available with him. So on the contrary, on the other hand, Mr. Y also wants to purchase Z's car which Z may not be intending to sell. हो सकता है कि जो Y उसकी कार को परचेज करने की कोशिश कर रहा है, वो हो सकता है कि भाई वो उस कार को बेचना ना चाह रहा हो, because Z is having no intentions to sell that car. इस particular situation में, do you really feel that are both the parties agreeing to this particular contract? And the second question is, do you really feel that these two parties agreeing upon the same thing or in the same sense? So to get the answer of this question, stay connected with us.
Now quality learning is easily available at your doorstep. S. Chand Academy brings detailed lectures based on UGC curriculum as per the New Education Policy 2020. So do not forget to subscribe to the S. Chand Academy and access the wide world of knowledge conveniently sitting within the comfort of your home. Stay connected and keep watching S. Chand Academy. Happy learning!
So welcome back to S. Chand Academy. My name is Mohit Kapil. We were talking about the topic that is free consent to form a valid contract. So in the last slide, we had a discussion regarding the essential conditions to form a free consent and in order to form a valid contract. So let us continue the slides. Let us move to the next slide. So we had a discussion regarding the absence of undue influence and the absence of fraud. Let us move to the next slide, and that is absence of mistake. Let us take an example first so that we can understand these 2 points. So for example, a person purchases a delicate glass product, mistakenly believing it to be an original work by a famous artist. The seller was absolutely known for his mistake and he misrepresented that particular glass product which was delicate to that particular buyer. The seller was known for the mistake and he remains silent during that particular business transaction. So what do you think? That it leads to both mistake and misrepresentation? Yes, that leads to both mistakes and misrepresentation in the contract by seller specifically. So in this particular slide, we will be talking about the absence of mistakes and absence of misrepresentation, again to have a free consent, to have a mutual consent in a valid contract. Let us understand the first point, referring to the example. The consent between the parties must be clear and true. Whatever the terms and conditions are there in a contract, that must be clearly communicated and that should be true. The terms and conditions of a contract should be clear to both the parties without any significant misunderstanding or any type of error. I hope this point is clear to you. And the second point, which is the last point here, absence of misrepresentation. The accurate and truthful information must be there during the contract. So please, यहाँ पर इस particular example में क्या हुआ? The seller was mistakenly giving that particular false information related to the delicate glass product to the buyer. And at the end, what happened? At the end, mistakes and misrepresentation दोनों ही बाहर निकल कर आ गई. So I hope this particular slide is clear to you and this slide makes you clear about these certain terms and conditions and certain essentials to form a free consent. To have a free consent, to have a mutual consent between both the contracting parties to form a valid contract. I hope this slide is clear to you. Let us move to the next slide. Okay, so now we will be discussing about the difference between consent and free consent. Very important and very interesting. There are 3 different, points on which we'll make a fine line difference between what is a consent and what is a free consent. बहुत ही confusing होता है कई बार बच्चों के लिए कि consent और free consent में difference क्या है. So here are the 3 points which will definitely clear you what is the fine line difference between them. So let us start with the first basis, and that is nature. So consent refers to the agreement or assent of parties to enter into a contract, while free consent emphasizes the voluntary and uncaused nature of that agreement. कंसेंट क्या होता है? कंसेंट एक रेफर करता है कुछ ऐसे एग्रीमेंट को जहां पे पार्टीज का एसेंट होता है टू एंटर इनटू ए कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. बट लेकिन ऑन द कॉन्ट्रेरी फ्री कंसेंट क्या होता है? फ्री कंसेंट का मतलब ही यही होता है कि मैं वॉलंटरीली मैं आपके साथ बिना किसी दबाव के उस पर्टिकुलर एग्रीमेंट में एग्री करता हूं। हो सकता है कि ऊपर वाले कॉन्सेंट में मैं शायद किसी दबाव से कॉन्सेंट दे रहा हूं, बट लेकिन फ्री कॉन्सेंट में मैं बिना किसी दबाव के अपनी मर्जी के साथ उस एग्रीमेंट में आ रहा हूं। दैट इज द नेचर ऑफ ए फ्री कॉन्सेंट एंड ए कॉन्सेंट। मूविंग टू द सेकंड पॉइंट, कोअर्जन एंड अनड्यू इन्फ्लुएंस। दबाव, जबरदस्ती किसी के साथ करना, उस पर्टिकुलर केस में कैसे कॉन्सेंट एंड फ्री कॉन्सेंट डिफरेंशिएट करते हैं आपस में। दिस इज द सेकंड पॉइंट, दिस इज द सेकंड पॉइंट व्हिच आई एम हाइलाइटिंग हियर, एंड व्हाट इज दैट? coercion and undue influence. Consent may still be valid even if there are external pressures or influences present. Please make a note of it. Consent तब भी valid होगा जब वहां पर कोई external pressure, कोई दबाव आपके ऊपर बना रहा होगा या कोई आपके ऊपर एक influence create कर रहा होगा। आप किसी impact की वजह से, जो impact आपके पास present है, आप वहां पे अपना consent दे रहे होंगे। But लेकिन on the contrary, free consent necessitates the exclusion of coercion or undue influence from the decision making process. But जो free consent है वो यहां पर बिल्कुल necessitate करता है exclusion, यानी कि वहां पे ना ही कोई किसी तरीके का दबाव, ना ही कोई किसी तरीके का प्रेशर आपके ऊपर होता है आपके अपने डिसीजन लेने में। So I hope the coercion and undue influence आपको बहुत ही अच्छे से क्लियर करता है what is the difference between a consent and a free consent. Consent may be there, चाहे एक्सटर्नल प्रेशर हो, चाहे वहां पर कोई इन्फ्लुएंस हो, बट लेकिन फ्री कंसेंट में ना ही कोई प्रेशर होता है, ना ही कोई इन्फ्लुएंस प्रेजेंट होता है। एंड दैट इज व्हाई आई हैव स्पेसिफिकली मेंशन्ड दैट इज एक्सक्लूजन ऑफ एनी कोअर्जन और अनड्यू इन्फ्लुएंस इन द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट और डिसीजन मेकिंग प्रोसेस। नाउ कमिंग टू द थर्ड पॉइंट, mistakes and misrepresentations. When we talk about misrepresentations means fraud, any fraudulent activity, any false information. So यहाँ पर कैसे consent and free consent को हम differentiate करते हैं? So consent may still be valid even there are minor mistakes or misunderstandings. Consent हमारा जो consent है वो फिर भी valid हो सकता है, चाहे भली थोड़ी सी mistakes और minor misunderstanding हमें दिख जाए। But लेकिन on the other hand, free consent always requires parties to be free from all the material mistakes or misrepresentation. अगर आपने कोई false information वहां present की है, अगर कोई वहां पे कोई fraudulent activity, अगर if something there is a fraud, then वहां पे वो free consent नहीं कहलाएगा। So it means free consent requires parties to be free from material mistake or misrepresentation, whereas consent may still be valid if there are mistakes or misunderstandings. So I hope with this particular note, this slide is clear to you. So we were talking about the differentiation between the consent and free consent. So there are 3 points: nature, coercion and undue influence, and mistakes and misrepresentation. So now this is the answer time. Remember this question which was given by me to you. आप excited है इसके आंसर को पाने के लिए? What do you think? In order to understand the business regulatory framework, ऐसे क्वेश्चंस को करने से आप लोगों को काफी clear understanding मिलती है and you can crack the examinations. I hope you can score good marks also. So let us study this particular example first so that we can understand what we were talking about. Let me tell you before moving to this particular example, हम लोगों ने अभी तक free consent के बारे में डिस्कस किया था। हम लोगों ने we started talking about the conditions of a free consent. हमेशा से किसी भी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट को बनाने के लिए इन ऑर्डर टू मेक अ वैलिड कॉन्ट्रैक्ट वॉइड भी होते हैं, कॉन्ट्रैक्ट वॉइडेबल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स भी होते हैं, बट लेकिन वो नलिफाइड होते हैं। बट लेकिन वैलिड कॉन्ट्रैक्ट को क्रिएट करने के लिए इन ऑर्डर टू हैव अ फ्रूटफुल एसोसिएशन विद अदर पीपल, यू आर ऑलवेज ईगर टू फॉर्म अ वैलिड कॉन्ट्रैक्ट। एंड हमेशा से वैलिड कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स को बनाने के लिए देयर इज ऑलवेज अ वन ingredient which is always very important, among the more ingredients, and that is free consent. उसके basis पे, and based on that particular concept, we have designed a question to you so that I can understand your knowledge. कि क्या आपको वाक्य में टॉपिक समझ में आया? Z wants to sell his car to Y. There are 2 people involved in it. Number 1, Mr. Z, and number 2 is Mr. Y. Z wants to sell his car to Mr. Y. यहाँ पे सिर्फ कार लिखा है. We don't know what kind of car it is. Either it is a luxury car or a non-luxury car. हमें नहीं पता ये स्विफ्ट डिजायर है या BMW है या ये मारुति सुजुकी की ऑल्टो है. I don't know that. बट लेकिन हम इस पर्टिकुलर एग्जाम्पल को पढ़ेंगे और समझेंगे तो हमें समझ में आ जाएगा कि एग्जैक्टली व्हाट ही इज टॉकिंग अबाउट. Z wants to sell his car to Mr. Y at a certain price. Let's say 20,000 rupees, 30,000, 50,000, yeah, 1 lakh. But Mr. Z did not specify which car he is trying to sell or which car he is offering to sell. यहाँ पे कार जो है that is not justified, that is not specified here. Sorry, I repeat, यहाँ पर जो कार है वो specified नहीं है. So which car as Z has various luxury and non-luxury cars? इसका मतलब क्या है कि that Z has various luxury and non-luxury cars, but लेकिन which car he is intending to sell, that is not clear in the question. On the contrary, Mr. Y, ये भी बड़े smart है. He also wants to purchase a car, but जो Z कार दे रहा है, हो सकता है वो Y परचेज करना ना चाह रहा हो, और जो Y परचेज करना चाहता है वो हो सकता है Z ना दे रहा हो. तो इट मीन्स देयर इज मिसमैच इन द इंटेंशंस ऑफ बोथ द पीपल. इसका मतलब साफ है कि जो हम बार बार बात कर रहे हैं, द वे वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट फ्री कंसेंट, दैट इज एब्सोल्युटली नॉट क्लियर हियर. इट मीन्स द इंटेंशंस आर नॉट क्लियर. सो हमारे पास क्वेश्चन क्या बनता है अब? Now, what do you think about this case? The case of Mr. Z and Mr. Y, the case is related to the car, the case is related to the intentions, the case is related to the free consent. क्या आपको लगता है both the parties are agreeing on the same thing? Absolutely no. Absolutely no. Because दोनों को नहीं पता कि वो दोनों कौन सी cars में deal करना चाह रहे हैं. Number second point, do you really believe that both the parties are agreeing upon the same thing? Luxury, non-luxury, but the Y was looking for the another car? Absolutely no. Correct? Or in the same sense means same intentions. Essentials, valid of a contract. Essential, valid of a contract. सबसे बड़ा एक और important point सामने आता है. What is that? Same intentions, free intentions, legal intentions, positive intentions. वो भी नहीं दिख रही है. So I hope the answer is clear to you. Are both the parties agreeing? No. Number two, are both the parties agreeing upon the same thing or in the same sense? No. Because यहाँ पे no, आप ये सोच रहे होंगे कि Y और Z दोनों एग्री है कार खरीदने के लिए, बट लेकिन क्या एग्री, मैं क्यों नो कर रहा हूं? बिकॉज नो यहाँ पे इसलिए किया जा रहा है बिकॉज दे डोंट नो फॉर विच कार दे आर एक्चुअली ट्राइंग टू एग्री. सो द आंसर ऑफ दीज टू क्वेश्चंस आर नो एंड अगेन नो. They both have intentions to purchase the car, but they don't know what kind of car they want to purchase. So I hope this particular example, this particular question, the answer of the question is clear to you.
If you want to study this topic in detail, refer to the book by S. Chand Publishing and Vikas Publishing House. Link is provided in the description box. If you found our video interesting, please like, share and subscribe. And do not forget to press the bell icon.
All rights reserved. This video has been prepared for educational purposes only. No part of it may be reproduced or copied without the permission of the copyright holder.